and it's easy because it's an email, and they usually reply within 24 hours, but it would be good if you do want me to follow up on that, just CC me on it, because it'll go to accessibility@cengage.com, and then just put my name under it. That way I know, because I don't necessarily get everything you guys might ask them, so if you want me to like chase someone, like they're pretty good though actually, but just in case. So so if you go to cengage.com again and you go all the way to the bottom, there's a bunch of things like here, like even if you're looking for a job, careers, you know, there's all on the bottom there. But accessibility, and then the privacy, because those two things has been coming up a lot. But I just wanted to point those out. So there's a bunch, and there's also if you there's alternate format. Like sometimes they need an alternate format. You can actually request it right here. So all you need to do is send that to your, you know, say, hey, there's this student, and they start asking you all these questions, and go, you know, Cengage, I'm using WebAssign, and they have this accessibility, you know. You can give them that link.
I don't know if you saw, but Pearson got sued, right, by a person who didn't have accessibility. Do you know what the accessibility requirements are for Mac?
Well, that's the thing, like I don't ever like to say anything about accessibility because it's a legal thing, and it really is dependent on the situation. Like you have to, it's accommodation, right? So what is the accommodation for that person? What do you need? So it's almost like I have to ask you, what do you need? Because I could do all these things, jump through hoops, do spins, and then it's like, no, I really want you to do a split. You know, like, so, you know, it's like you just, we want them to ask us, what do you need to, so you feel that it's, you know, and then.
So they have to then send it to you, so that, or this.
Yeah, I would say start with the excessive, like, say, do you need a VPAT? That's how they talk, that's why, you know. You cannot sound really intelligent. Do you need a VPAT? With your accessibility office. And if not, I say, oh, would you like to contact her if you have specific questions? Because can you email that to me? Because then it's easy, because you can just grab that and then email the accessibility office and not even have to because sometimes, you know, when you word something, you might incorrectly say something, and when it's a legal thing, you kind of want to, a word you might think is not important is actually important. So that's just a safest way. And they can always send it to me, and that's exactly what I do. What exactly do you need? Boom. Accessibility, because that's like a area I don't ever guess on. Yeah. So anyway, he's going to show you some things in WebAssign that what we're doing is we're moving away from Flash at least, but that's not necessarily accessibility, but for some it is, right? They can't get their thing to load. So he's going to go through some other things with accessibility as well, and what he does. So this is Mike.
Yes, hello everyone.
Yay!
Thank you. So I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for Cengage allowing me to be here today. And I'm going to spend some time going over the broader picture of assessment in the areas of co-requisite specifically, to try to give you some ideas of examples that you may wish to use. I'll speak to the co-requisite attempts that I've been engaged in the hopes of helping my students reach the level of college algebra. Credit is where I'll focus today. And as a matter of doing that, I've got a few slides that I set up for us to try to keep me on track and guide me through. The first thing I wanted to point out as a disclaimer, I choose to use WebAssign. It happened by accident. I literally found it in the back of a book one time when I was asked to teach a course, and that was in 2007. And since that time, I've embraced it for its customization. So that would be a heavy aspect of what I concentrate on today. The other is I do use Cengage Unlimited now for the faculty perspective. And the reason why is I have access to all the content under that $119 price. So I'm trying to be careful how I show you things. It's because I've chosen to give myself access. At the same time, I've chosen books and packages of books that Jess knows. I've done this before I met Jess, in ways that allow me to use it for multiple semesters. So there are some interesting ways you can maximize the use of that approach so that your students aren't having to incur costs time and again semester to semester because of the life of addition. So I use Stewart, I use Gustafson, and I also use some intermediate algebra resources all in one course to accomplish some of the things I'm sharing with you today. So that's meant to give you some context. So the online assessment piece that I wanted to focus on today, I wanted to give us at least a goal of trying to look at online assessment tools in general. I will be demonstrating through WebAssign, but the idea is to build something to gather your students' procedural as well as conceptual understanding. And I've gotten some progress on the conceptual side. I would argue I went about this a bit backwards. Heavy use of procedural assessments and validation. That was easier for me to grade it looking back. And I've been experimenting with some ideas of capturing student thought in ways to help assess their conceptual understanding. So got some quizzes or preliminary tests to gate students into a direction that would hopefully allow them to master the material. The caveat to this approach, at least so far as I found, is I run out of time. The difficulty is the semester is not long enough. We're in 14-week semesters, so reaching this goal has been challenging. I've been using registrar bureaucracy to my advantage in the form of incompletes, and I've used it so that as our semesters end and they go into December, or as they end in spring and go into summer, I use the extra time to see what a student would really have needed to finish the course. And I'm talking about the 10% of my students that tend to fall behind and get overwhelmed with the volume of content I've been putting into my courses. And my hope there is to try to figure out how to further whittle down or narrow down the content in the course to meet just what they need, is what I'm still experimenting with. And I'm going to share with you today some of the next iterations of that as well. So I do use video, both in the conveyance of what I want them to learn, but also in receive what they are learning and what they want to convey to me. That's been a pressure point of rub and so forth. There is some, I do take some consideration to ADA. I have students who are hearing impaired as well as visually impaired. So I feel and they tell me I'm meeting their specific needs, but I do worry that I'm not universally appealing to all or any student who would show up at my door. I feel like I'm not quite there yet in my assessment of using a universal design approach for ADA compliance. So I feel you're going to find some things where there's room for improvement. So feel free to point those out so others are aware as well. So those are the goals. I'm going to show you, just highlight a few co-rec model ideas. And I can zoom in on some of these things. I did try it just a moment ago. This is a little too wordy for a slide, but this gives you some idea of what we have. The idea of these three models, and these are shareable if you wish to have them at some point, but they're out there in the common conveyance of this topic, it seems, as I've been looking about. And the idea of putting your content in conjunction with a linked set of support materials and allow the students to exist either with another instructor or be taught by yourself in a separate time slot prior to the core content, as I call it, that is there for college algebra as an example. I might have some elementary, intermediate algebra content that precedes it. I have been using multiple books to accomplish this so that as they progress, I even believe there's a way to go all the way through pre-calc, if not calculus, if structured right, to help you with the students who have that long pathway to achieve. So there are ways to separate these out. It's not my favorite model. I've tried it. I prefer more of an integrated model you'll see in a bit. And so that brings me to the idea of just-in-time is a popular choice of combining the content from the multiple resources. Yes, sir, Eric? Yeah.
Before you get further into the models, what are the methods that your college uses to place students? So what is their criteria for college ready versus not quite and meets core requisite?
So we have two criteria at the moment. We were in the midst of a transition from what we previously used, which was Compass, and I was involved in some of those cut scores and the different starting points in that Compass tool. We've switched over to AccuPlacer for a period of time, and now we're switching over once again to another tool for placement. We do use the ACT as a cut score for placement into college-ready algebra, and I believe that is set at the moment 22. There's some discrepancies there because we're also a College Credit Plus is the program in our state with high school students, and there's some differences between 22 and 23 apparently in how we at Ohio University choose to accept students. And so
do you have multiple measures in addition to the placement
we
test?
do not, no.
Oh,
No.
I
It
see.
is being discussed, and certainly as some of our colleagues are aware, that's important, but at the moment it's being handled out of a registrar, higher level student services area more than the academic departments. The math department certainly is involved, but my assessment looking outside in is that it's not as involved as they could be.
Thank you, because that
A lot of advisors take a role in that.
sometimes affects
That's what
which model might work the best for your
Oh,
situation.
certainly. Yeah, and so what I'm noticing is what I do cater to are students that have, I would categorize it as a near intermediate algebra placement. So this isn't your basic math students. There are some developmental courses that are still on our books, and then we've even added one, I'm not in agreement with it, but we have basically 2 to 3 different developmental courses, how they're categorized, that allow students to take prior to their entry into college algebra. So there's some disagreement at our university in terms of how we go about doing that. The one that I failed to mention in terms of placement, we are looking at, the Alex is the latest one that we're looking at for placement, was the one I failed to not mention by name, but the idea is that we're using that as a university. At our institution, we get to choose, we have core learning objectives, outcomes that we are supposed to meet. We put those in our syllabi, and then we get the flexibility of choosing books and platforms, so we have a variety of uses. And some have gone well, some haven't. Some students have pushed back, not on mine, but I know of other attempts to use other platforms and so forth, and they've asked for non-platform sections to the point that they just want the traditional approach to teaching with board and chalk, so to speak, that sort of thing, non-platform. So it's been an interesting ride. So yes, that's excellent to have that context as to what these co-requisite models are been used for. This design here is where I put and couple with the content that I feel is appropriately staging their knowledge to enter into the core content. So this is a just-in-time model. The other is a customization of sorts, and that's where I'm probably leaning more to. Sorry, let me zoom back out. Leaning more to, and I'm really trying to no longer set assignments just separate from the core assignments. When I show you what's in this online assessment platform, is you'll see the very distinct separation between what is co-requisite and what is likely to be the core content for college algebra. What I'm now looking at is the ability to incorporate questions in the assignments in and of themselves, and that's an attempt to shorten the time that I've run out of at the end of various semesters. The completion rate of my course, we use proctored exams. I teach, by the way, another piece of context, I teach primarily online, and I've been doing that for a number of years. I've been almost near begging to go back to the classroom. I've got one section now split off online into the classroom. But I've got a pretty good track record of completing students to a degree where they go on and have that contribution to their next level of learning. And so I'm getting 70, 80, and I've gotten as high as 90% completion with open enrollment, but it's hard to get the end of that because my students sometimes still sign up just for the sake of seeking out financial aid, or they just drop off and I can't seem to pull them in. A lot of intervention techniques that we use at our school. We use Starfish and other tools to try to help intervene with students when we need them to return and focus on their studies. So this custom approach is more my leanings, is where I'm focusing at the assignment level and parsing the questions that might be relevant at the moment they need them. So less of a separation like the first model would have implied. So what I'd like to do is switch over to the platform and give some more visual representation of how this looks implemented. And in order to do that, I've got quite a few demonstration, so I'm going to get lost here because I got too many things open. This is my downfall. Here we go. So in this first approach, I've whittled this down quite a bit for the sake, sorry for the flutter, I'm hoping I can fix this. There we go. So this first example is the standard, you've got core content you expect students to achieve in terms of homework. This could also be assignments that are in the category of quizzes and exams, as well as labs, so there's the opportunity there. I no longer look at assignments as just that which they have to perform or contribute to it. They're now informative, they're opportunities to exchange information. I pretty much embed anything in my online assessment tools as support resources, and the video is the most popular these days with my attempts to inform my students. So this would be a traditional pathway of content that the students would be expected to follow, but what happens now is that the content is actually coupled with a prerequisite model. So it would look something like this as an instructor. We would have literally just separate assignments, but listed in separate sections, and the student would have the ability to go to a separate teacher, instructor, and perform on those. We could have them separate as you've seen them distinctly listed here, and then of course the grading could be separated and kept apart until it's decided upon that they need to be brought together, or credits can be assigned in those separate manners. The next model is more of the integrated approach, which is just the melding of those two together. So what you're seeing on the screen is that precursor of material that would be co-requisite. The prereq is what they're using in the terminology here that I'm borrowing at the moment. And it leads into the core content that we find below. So this is a little bit different though, in that there's going to be staging. So a student would need to complete a diagnostic or an assessment of what they understand at this prior point. And then if they happen to not succeed at that quiz level to a degree you've determined, they would have supporting materials that they would be able to self-diagnose and go into with some depth. All students at my course are expected to validate their learning. I don't have an opportunity for them to jump over or skip entire material, but they have to validate it at various stages. They can move faster if they choose, and I do allow about 10% tend to move faster than my predetermined schedule. But these quizzes are, and you're going to go into this in just a minute. I'm going to open this up and we'll play with this in just a bit. But these quizzes will dictate, if they reach a level of threshold, whether they progress. So that's where the time issue comes in. The students keep working until they get the necessary level of threshold. And I've fluctuated from 80, 90, and in some cases I do hold to 100% in order for them to have that content knowledge to move on to the next level of education. And so that pushes out the deadlines, which thankfully I can use my platform to handle that and manage. My class sizes, I have college algebra around 120 in a semester, and then I have 60 is a small class for me on some occasions, depending what semester it is. And so it gets a little tiresome to try to keep up. I'm not going to dispel that. It's not all roses and cake and candy and stuff. It's tough. There's a lot of time commitment. But thankfully, the automation that has helped me, you're going to see things I've been able to embark on because of the auto grading that goes on. I like a lot of what it does in terms of equivalencies and expressions and equations, and also the numerical aspects of it as well. So I favor the algorithms quite a bit. So that's your breakdown of a flow. Now, as you're about to go in this, you're going to see some things that are different in WebAssign that you may not have noticed before. There's been an update, so I want to prepare you for what you're about to get into. I'm going to open you up to a course here to try out. And the user interface has changed. It's in line with what Jess was referring to earlier with regards to ADA. There's a component of this that has accessibility component associated with it. But primarily, the thing that students notice the most that have used my course is the aesthetic. You'll notice it's changed quite a bit from the instructor view. They focused on the student view being aesthetically a bit more pleasing to the eye. And so what you'll notice as I switch through this, it has also an ability for mobility. So what I've simulated here in Firefox, there's a shortcut, keyboard shortcut. You can simulate iPads, iPhones. And so what I did is I just did a keyboard shortcut. I can hit iPad. And you get a feel for what this looks like in a more portable format when it comes to the screen size. My students, thankfully only 2 or 3 I've noticed, have tried to complete their courses using just a singular cell phone. We live in southern Ohio, which is rural. It's on the hills of Appalachia, and so it doesn't have the high-speed bandwidth still to this day in some areas of our service. And so they'll use their phones as a means of completing, and they have completed it. This has improved that portability. The other is the screen reading capability for accessibility has been improved. So these are the things you're going to notice in terms of the platform that you want to look for. The other thing that you're going to notice when you go into these assignments and start to practice, we'll give you a few minutes to try this, is the auto-saving feature. They're moving away. I went this purposely. This is not going to happen anymore. You won't see it in your demo example. This is a lingering issue with Flash. That's already, I am piloting a non-Flash version of all this stuff, so that's been going away, and that'll be gone in, what do you call it, fall, excuse me, at the end of fall 2019, we'll see a JavaScript-based graphing and tools, so they're all switching over to HTML5. But what I want to point out, what's going to happen when you go into your assignment, you're going to see this change that happened to as well, so you know what's going on when you see it, is inside WebAssign they have now a new autosave feature. So as students work to type in their results, as you see I've typed in 34, autosave will kick in every 3 to 5 seconds as it tries to hold on to it. And so if you choose not to submit your work, just a heads up, I can still retrieve your work once it's been saved. So there are ways for me as a faculty member to still put it into the grade book if I so choose. So just so you know, the Big Brother piece is lingering in these systems. So it's growing back to some of the things that we were talking about prior to my time. So yeah, that's really the items that I wanted to highlight: the non-flash, the autosave, mobility, and some compliance improvements with regards to ADA. Now there is another piece to this that not all questions currently that you have to choose are ADA compliant. So this is another level than the platform compliance. What I tend to look for in platform compliance is that I don't have to use my mouse. That's one criteria I use. It's not the sole criteria, but I use it so that keyboard accessibility is possible. And it's not 100%, so that's something I know is in the works. The other is the question type. So to do graphing questions, I've looked at tactile techniques, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that with video. So video makes it challenging when you have students record their work, which is what I do. But there are WebAssign questions that they will make for you for the sake of ADA compliance. And I'll show you some a little later in terms of what a question looks like without ADA compliance, and then what it looks like with the implementation of ADA compliance. And what it primarily shifts to is multiple choice, so the graph can be interpreted. The graphs are written in a form of Perl, using Perl, and there's LaTeX behind it somehow. LaTeX being used to also script the graphs, and then there's the ability for the JAWS and other readers to translate or make that available to the end user, the student. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to showcase a sample for you to sign in with. And the hope is that you have a login. If you don't, I have a generic set of them that you can borrow. I'd prefer you use your own. But what I'm going to do is put on the screen a sample course that I've made. And of course, I'm having difficulty finding it. I put it in so many places. I got to find it. There we are. I found it. I know where I'm at now. So I put together a course. And I'm going to have you go through it like a student would go through it. And I'm going to put this class key up on the screen here. I'm going to zoom in so it's a bit easier to read. It's really big. Here we go. There we go. Nice and big. And this is what is a typical class key approach. I don't use this, so I'm a little clunky at it maybe. I might experience that here as I give out instructions. But the idea is that I like my students to use our learning management system. It helps me avoid nicknames and errors in their typing when they make entry into my course in terms of their student ID. But you're going to have the opportunity to enter in with your own account or make one up for that matter. Actually, you can do that.
Actually, Mike, I don't know if they know you can do the roster upload.
Oh, no?
You can tell them that it's
Yeah.
not something that you...
Oh, so yeah, I use also a roster upload. So you have the ability to synchronize with your learning management system. We use Blackboard. I've used it with Canvas. There is a way to use a roster. So I've made free student accounts using roster upload, and so that's how I demonstrate things, and I don't have any special privileges. But if you make a roster of just a spreadsheet and load it into a course, that creates whatever number of user accounts for you to exploit. And so roster upload is a possibility.
So you don't
well
have
as
to
class
link
key.
it in your Lalima, and you don't have to give them a course key. You know how my math lab you do course key? You can just say, I want them all to use their email, and I'm going to put them in, and then they put in their access code. So you can take from like Banner and upload. That's like, you have options. You can have them, give them a course key, or you can just put them all in, and then all they have to do is log in. You can say log in with your email, and your password is whatever. Change it, and then you just have to have them put in their, that way they're, you know how that access code issue comes up sometimes, like they don't know what course to register into. That avoids that. If you don't want to do IDAP, let's say for Jody, but she likes the registration process to be simpler, but you don't want IDAP.
So what I'm hoping you will do, if you'd like to participate and put this through the rigors and pace of evaluation and scrutiny that I think you can bring, I choose to go to the webassign.net site. It's likely to go away at some point, as Cengage has acquired WebAssign many years ago. I tend to go to the old-fashioned website it's still operational. My students I use as a backup actually to go there when Blackboard goes down at my institution, and it does. So webassign.net would be my recommended location for you. And in the top right corner of that entry is a enter class key. If you'd like to participate, you'd be able to use the enter class key feature at the top right. And the class key begins with my institution of Ohio and a series of numerics that help you uniquely enter this course shell. Now, it should work both on Chrome and Firefox, so I invite you to try that out as well. I'm using the new JavaScript graphing tool, so you should be able to see what the JavaScript looks like. It shouldn't look any different, really. There's some subtleties I notice compared to Flash. That's going away. I'm using a pilot version of it. And the other possibility is I have an iPad, so I use it on that. You can try that, or your phone if you want to try the limited screen size, you can try that. I'm not saying everything's 100% perfect, but I have had success and overall good experiences that you might be able to help me validate or not. So I'll give that just another 30 seconds to a minute, and if you've made your way into it, there's a quiz for you to take. I'd like you to go ahead and answer, I think, 7 or 8 questions. And I'm going to show how this plays out and guide us through it. There are questions on some fractions, factoring, some things that I think are quite straightforward. But we'll see. So I hold off because I know that you might want to write down that code so I can move screens over. If you need any technical help or something that comes up on your screen that doesn't look correct, please raise your hand. Jess, you can. some folks will walk around, maybe I'll help you, Pat.
Oh.
All right. No, all right, Pat. Am I all right to move off this? Anyone need the course class key? Anyone need any help before I move on? If you log in, you'll likely see something to this effect. The banner is warning about the flash. There is no flash. That's a cautious note. The content I'm using, it does not require flash, so you'll be able to tell me whether that's true or not. But the item I'd like you to work on is the prerequisite Chapter 1 quiz. And in that quiz, if you do succeed at completing it sufficiently, you'll notice the core content that is primarily my objective is grayed out on my screen. I've not entered into the quiz just yet sufficient amount of performance to open up access to the core content. So the idea here is to get at least a bit of experience as to how this conditional release or gateway technique, as I sequentially move my students through the co-requisite material, opens up. And if they happen to fall short, then they have the co-requisite material called the prerequisite material that they can enter into. So go ahead and try a series of questions. I've done my best to give you a sampling of some fractional entries without the graphical pad that comes with WebAssign or online tools that you might see in other platforms. I've also given you some algebraic entries. And finally, I put a graphical piece, I believe. Or no, I saved that for later. Yes, sir.
You want us to purposely get it right or wrong?
Yeah, I'm okay since we have so many individuals that could get it right and wrong. You can partner with somebody next to you to see how it results in a wrong. And the neat thing is if you do get it wrong, you want to do it on a solo effort, there are a number of submissions. I set it up for, I think, 6 submissions. You could go back and correct yourself, and that's what this is designed to accomplish. So yeah, feel free to make errors and try to tax the system in terms of misinterpreting mathematics, that sort of thing. This is just an entree. I'm going to show some more advanced things here in just a bit, just to get you familiar with what we're about to dive into more deeply.
Get everything wrong is harder than get everything right.
So I'm going to go in and try to perform this quiz.
It tells you right
I happen to have nullified my quiz score, so I got to reset it. Looks like folks are joining us. We can progressively tell.
Okay. Oh, reset the password first.
Before trying,
She can reset the password.
83%.
I think we need a perfect zero here.
Let's go, Evan. Can everybody get in? Anybody else? What is the first key?
Yeah, I just closed it. Sorry.
I know it's Ohio something. That's what 3518166.
And you have it. What,
Yeah,
see
what
what
is it?
happened? What kind of problem maybe you
Ohio 35. Oh,
Jess, you got it all right? Class key?
oh, I know. Go to send me. You probably never went into website.
That's for your actual the website.
Oh, yeah, fine.
You wanted to be again?
Yeah.
You all heard of it?
You never changed it.
Correct.
But it didn't work.
If you registered with already?
Only 6 problems.
Yeah, it should be on 6 or 8 problems, I think. Is that what you're on? Yeah. So I've cut them back quite a bit. I edited it down.
Oh,
Did you get a perfect zero? Yes.
to help.
Everyone's getting everything wrong.
Well, considering last time I had a big acting placer, I was supposed to try and go for the lowest setting and score the highest.
How long did that take though?
Not too long. And some of the questions are kind of tricky the way it was worded. I had to really think of something. Like the wording.
Yeah, you know, when you enter in at the lowest level, you have less chance of placing high.
That's what I heard.
Wacky questions.
I heard the lowest you can place is math level.
To be fair, at least there's only 2 levels now. At least there's only 2 levels.
So you can place it and you go in second level.
Going to the higher level, but you get places
Because
The first one called the quiz. The chapter.
If we reset your password or anything, it's gonna be Cengage1, capital C, just so you guys know. And then you can always reset it to something else after.
I thought you get nothing right, you get that's what I heard.
well, see, I don't know how places, I know how compass used to work. Compass, you go the highest one from you make your lowest one, and then on that one it drops. So it is possible for you to go the highest one down to the lowest place.
Compass is better.
But at the place, I don't know if that's optional, but if you start at the highest, it might be a cap.
I don't think you place
So here we go. We get a survey of how people are doing. You can get fairly near real-time results here. And, complete contrary to privacy. The idea of folks completing it, making some progress.
I would do this.
Oh, these guys are actually trying.
Yeah,
100%.
got some good results.
Awesome.
Now, what I'd like you to try, what I'd like you to try is to go into the portions that follow it. I put some concept check activities that would help my students diagnose and ultimately learn the material you're welcome to try out. There's something new there I was going to share with you. If you'd like to go in those prerequisite sections, you'll see some additionally new items that are about to be released.